A small trading account does something strange to people. Not because of the money itself, but because of what that money starts to mean. When your account is small, every trade feels bigger than it is. A win feels like proof. A loss feels like damage. A missed move feels unbearable. And without noticing it, you stop trading the market and start reacting to your own emotions. That's why so many traders with small accounts do the exact things that keep them small. They overtrade because they feel behind. They size too big because small gains feel pointless. They move stops because taking a loss feels like failure. They chase because waiting feels like wasting time. And the worst part is, most of this doesn't feel reckless in the moment. It feels justified. It feels urgent. It feels like you're trying to make progress. You start the day with one clean trade. Maybe it wins. Confidence rises. The next setup looks good too. Then a loss hits. Suddenly the tone changes. Now the goal is no longer to trade well. The goal is to get back, to fix it, to prove something. One more trade becomes three becomes seven. By the end of the session, the market didn't really beat you. Your own state of mind did. If you've lived that cycle, you're not broken, and you're not uniquely undisciplined. You're dealing with a psychological trap that catches almost everyone when the account is too emotionally heavy. And if you can understand that trap, really understand it, you can start doing something most traders never do. You can stop treating a small account like a race, and start treating it like the training ground that eventually creates big money. Most new traders believe the challenge of a small account is simple: not enough capital. That sounds logical. If the account were bigger, losses would feel smaller, gains would add up faster, and there would be more room to breathe. And yes, capital matters, but that's only the surface issue. The deeper problem is that a small account changes your perception. It makes everything feel loud. A $20 move in your favor feels important. A $30 loss feels personal. A missed setup feels like a lost opportunity you can't afford. The account may be small in absolute terms, but psychologically it becomes oversized. It takes up too much space in your mind. That's when trading starts to distort. You're no longer calmly asking, is this a valid setup according to my rules? Now the internal dialogue sounds different. I need this one to work. If this wins, I'm back on track. I can't just sit here and do nothing. I missed the first move, but maybe I can catch the rest. This is probably close enough. That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Because once the account feels urgent, patience starts to feel expensive. Waiting for your setup feels uncomfortable. Taking a small planned loss feels unnecessary. Skipping a mediocre trade feels like you're falling behind. Closing the platform feels weak. And that's how a small account quietly pushes you away from good trading. Not through one dramatic mistake, but through pressure. Constant, low-level pressure. The kind that makes you negotiate with your rules a little more each day. You begin with a strategy, but you slowly start trading your P and L instead of your edge. A lot of traders think the answer is more effort, more screen time, more analysis, more trades. But pressure doesn't create clarity, it usually does the opposite. It narrows your thinking and makes action feel more valuable than judgment. That's why someone with a small account can know what they should do and still keep doing the opposite. They're not lacking information. They're trading from a state that makes good decisions harder to access. There's a moment in many trading sessions where the whole game changes. The chart looks the same. Your setup might even look similar. But mentally you are no longer trading. You are surviving. This often happens right after a loss, especially if the day started with hope. Maybe you came in focused. Maybe you had a clean plan. Maybe the first trade worked and you felt composed. Then one trade goes against you, or two. And now there's tension in your body. You lean forward. You start checking your P and L more often. You feel the need to make something happen. That's the moment good process begins to disappear. When you're in a survival state, your brain stops caring about quality in the same way. It starts prioritizing relief, relief from frustration, relief from fear, relief from the feeling that the day is slipping away. And this is why revenge trading is so common, but the phrase revenge trading almost makes it sound too dramatic. In reality, it often looks ordinary. You take a setup that's slightly early. You widen your criteria just a little. You increase size because the last trade should have worked. You stay in a bad position because exiting now would make the loss real. Nothing about it looks insane from the outside. It just looks slightly off. But slightly off, repeated over and over, is enough to destroy an account. This is one of the hardest truths in trading. The most dangerous mistakes rarely feel dangerous while you're making them. They feel necessary. That's why so many traders say things like, "I don't know what happened. I was trading well. Then I just lost control." What happened is that they crossed an invisible psychological line. They moved from executing a system to trying to escape discomfort. And once that happens, the market becomes the wrong thing to focus on. The real issue is no longer the setup. It's your state. Because if your mind is trying to feel better, it will use trading as the tool. And trading used as emotional relief almost always turns expensive. A small account doesn't just create pressure. It changes how your brain interprets the experience. When you catch a quick win, especially after waiting or struggling, it feels powerful. Not just financially, emotionally. There's a rush in it. For a moment, everything feels clean again. You feel capable. You feel sharp. You feel like progress is finally happening. That feeling matters more than most traders realize, because the brain loves fast reward. It remembers the emotional hit attached to a win, and it starts craving that state again. Not necessarily the money itself, but the relief, the validation, the sense of movement. Then a loss comes in. Now the chemistry changes. The same brain that got excited by reward suddenly shifts into threat mode. Instead of possibility, it sees danger. Instead of patience, it wants resolution. The loss may be small on paper, but in your nervous system, it feels larger because it interrupts the emotional story you were telling yourself. I was doing well. I was finally getting somewhere. Now I need to fix this. This is where traders become reactive without fully realizing it. They think they are making market decisions, but often they are making emotional regulation decisions. They enter because they want the feeling of momentum back. They hold because they want to avoid the pain of being wrong. They add because they want to erase discomfort faster. They break rules because structure feels too slow for the urgency they feel. And this is why telling a struggling trader to just be disciplined usually doesn't help much. Discipline matters, of course. But if someone doesn't understand the mechanism underneath their impulsive behavior, they'll keep treating symptoms instead of causes. The cause is often this: their brain has linked trading to emotional repair. A win repairs confidence. A loss damages identity. Another trade becomes the attempted repair. That loop can go on for weeks, months, sometimes years. Not because the trader is irrational in general, but because in the moment the brain is solving the wrong problem. It thinks the goal is to get back to emotional safety, so it urges action, not accuracy. And when your account is small, that urge becomes even louder because every fluctuation feels meaningful. That's why a trader with a tiny account can feel more emotional than a trader risking much more money. The intensity is not only about amount, it's about significance. Once that emotional pressure builds, it starts showing up in behavior, and the patterns are remarkably consistent. The first is overtrading. Overtrading doesn't always come from greed. Very often it comes from discomfort. A trader feels uneasy when they're not in the market. Flat feels unproductive. Waiting feels like falling behind. So they keep clicking, not because every trade is good, but because action feels better than uncertainty. This is why someone can spend hours working in the market and end the day worse off than if they had taken one trade and walked away. The activity creates the illusion of effort, but effort and effectiveness are not the same thing. Then there's oversizing. This one usually starts with a sentence that sounds reasonable in your head. My account is small, so I need to make the trades count. That's where the danger begins, because now size is no longer based on risk tolerance or setup quality. It's based on emotional impatience. You're not sizing for longevity. You're sizing for escape. A trader risks too much because small returns feel insulting. They want progress they can feel. They want the account to move. So they increase size, and now every tiny fluctuation hits harder. The position becomes harder to manage. The stop feels tighter. Fear arrives earlier. Decisions get worse. The trade didn't become more powerful. It became more emotional. Then comes stop movement and exit avoidance. This is one of the clearest examples of psychology overriding logic. A trader places a stop while calm. It makes sense then. It fits the setup. It protects the account. But once price moves close to that level, the emotional meaning changes. If I let this hit, I lock in the loss. What if it reverses right after? I don't want to be shaken out. Maybe I should give it a little more room. What they are really saying is, I don't want to feel this yet. So they move the stop, or remove it mentally, or refuse to exit at all. And what started as a controlled loss becomes account damage. The point is not that traders don't know these behaviors are bad. Most do. The point is that under pressure, these behaviors feel like protection. Overtrading feels like trying. Oversizing feels like commitment. Moving stops feels like flexibility. Refusing to quit for the day feels like resilience. That's how the trap works. It disguises self-sabotage as determination. There's another layer to this that matters even more than most people think. Your trading is not only about money, it is also about identity. That sounds abstract until you watch it happen in real time. A trader takes a loss, and the pain is bigger than the dollars involved. Why? Because the loss doesn't just mean that trade failed. It starts to mean, maybe I'm not good at this. Maybe I'm still guessing. Maybe I'm not progressing. Maybe all this effort isn't leading anywhere. Now the trade is carrying too much psychological weight. This is where the small account becomes dangerous in a very specific way. Because if your account is small, chances are your expectations are emotionally large. You want growth. You want proof. You want to feel that this is going somewhere. So when a trade loses, the mind doesn't experience it as a normal business expense. It experiences it as a threat to self-image. And once identity gets involved, objectivity disappears fast. Now, you don't just want the next trade to make money. You want it to restore belief in yourself. That is a completely different kind of pressure. It's why traders force setups after a red day. It's why they stay at the screen too long. It's why they feel unable to end the session on a loss. It's why one bad trade can trigger 5 worse ones. They're not simply trying to recover money. They're trying to recover emotional certainty. The problem is the market has no interest in doing that for you. The market does not care if you need a win today. It does not care if you feel behind. It does not care if you need reassurance. So when you use trading to protect your identity, you put yourself in conflict with reality. You stop listening to what the chart is offering and start demanding that it give you something emotionally. That demand is where discipline breaks, because rules are easy to follow when they align with what you want. The real test is when they deny you emotional relief. That's why many traders can look disciplined during normal conditions, but fall apart once they feel threatened. The issue was never the written rules. The issue was that their sense of self was still tied to the outcome of the next trade. This becomes easier to understand when you compare two traders seeing the exact same setup. Both traders have the same account size. Both see the same market. Both know the same basic strategy. But one trader sees a trade as one event in a long series. The other sees it as a verdict. The first trader is thinking in probabilities. They know a good trade can lose. They know a bad trade can win. They know their job is not to control the outcome, but to execute well over time. So when they enter, there's less emotional drama attached to the result. If the trade works, fine. If it doesn't, they record it, review it, and move on. The second trader is thinking in outcomes. If this trade wins, they feel smart. If it loses, they feel shaken. If they miss it, they feel frustrated. If they take it and get stopped, they feel the need to make it back. On the surface, the difference looks like emotion versus discipline, but underneath it's really time horizon versus time horizon. The probabilistic trader is living in the next 100 trades. The emotional trader is trapped in the next 10 minutes. That changes everything. When you're trapped in the immediate result, every tick matters too much. You stare at unrealized P and L. You interpret random movement as meaningful. You interfere with trades because uncertainty feels unbearable. But when you're operating from a larger sample, there's more room to breathe. You stop asking, will this trade save the day? You start asking, was this my setup? Did I execute it correctly? Was the risk appropriate? That is the mindset that eventually allows a small account to grow. Not because it creates magic returns overnight, but because it protects the one thing every small account needs: survival long enough for skill to matter. A small account can become big money, but only if it stops being treated like a lottery ticket. It has to be managed like a process, quietly, repeatedly, sometimes boringly. And that's hard for people, because boring does not feel powerful. It feels slow. Until you realize slow is often the only speed that compounds. Most traders set rules as if rules are there to control the market. They're not. Rules are there to control you. That shift alone matters because once you understand it, risk management stops feeling restrictive and starts feeling protective. If you have a small account, you need rules that remove negotiation from emotional moments, not vague intentions, not "I'll try to be patient." Real structures that make damage harder to do. The first is fixed risk per trade. Before you enter, you should already know the exact amount you are willing to lose if the trade fails, not the amount you hope to lose, not the amount that depends on how you feel in the moment. A fixed amount. Why does this matter so much? Because if risk is undefined, emotion fills the gap. And once emotion is managing size, every trade becomes unstable. A small account doesn't need heroic gains, it needs controlled exposure. The second rule is a hard daily loss limit. This is one of the most important protections a trader can have, especially when learning. Because the biggest account damage rarely comes from one planned loss. It comes from the behavior after the planned loss. You take one clean loss, then a frustration trade, then a revenge trade, then a bigger trade, because now the day feels broken. The daily max loss stops that chain reaction. It tells you your decision-making is no longer trusted today. That may sound harsh, but it's actually respectful. It acknowledges that you are human and that emotional deterioration is real. The third is a limit on the number of trades. This forces selectivity. It interrupts compulsive clicking. It makes every entry more expensive in a psychological sense because you know you don't have infinite attempts. A trader with unlimited trades usually trades worse. A trader with a cap starts protecting each decision. And the fourth is position sizing based on preservation, not fantasy. This means your size should allow you to think clearly. If the position is so large that every small movement changes your breathing, the size is wrong, no matter how good the setup looks. You should be able to take the stop without emotional shock. If you can't, your account is being asked to carry more than your mind can manage. That's the standard. These rules don't guarantee profit. They do something more important first. They keep you stable enough to learn. They stop one bad hour from becoming one bad month. They create an environment where discipline is less dependent on mood. And that's crucial, because if your trading only works when you feel good, it doesn't really work. There's a moment before most bad decisions that feels almost physical. You know it. Your chest tightens, your attention narrows, you feel pulled toward the button. Part of you knows the trade isn't right, or the size is too big, or the reason is emotional. But another part says, just do it. You need this. That moment is where many accounts are damaged, not because the trader lacks knowledge, but because they don't interrupt the state quickly enough. This is where a pause protocol becomes powerful. Not a vague idea of calming down, a real interruption. When you feel that surge after a loss, after a missed move, after a streak of boredom, there should be a predetermined response. Step away for 10 minutes. Stand up. Write down why you want to take the trade before you enter it. Read your rules out loud. Close the platform if needed. The exact method matters less than the fact that it is pre-decided. Because in emotional moments, you do not want to invent discipline from scratch. You want to rely on structure that was built while you were clear-headed. This is where simple if/then rules are incredibly useful. If I take 2 losses in a row, then I stop for 20 minutes. If I feel the urge to increase size after a loss, then I reduce size or stop trading. If I catch myself watching my P and L more than the chart, then I step away. If I miss a move and feel like chasing, then I am not allowed to enter for the next candle. These rules sound basic, but that's the point. Under pressure, complexity collapses, simplicity survives, and over time, this does something important. It teaches your nervous system that discomfort does not require immediate action. That may be one of the most valuable lessons in trading, because most destructive trades come from the belief that the feeling must be resolved right now. But it doesn't. You can feel behind and do nothing. You can feel frustrated and do nothing. You can feel the urge to win it back and do nothing. That ability looks passive from the outside. In reality, it is one of the highest forms of control a trader can build. The phrase, turning a small account into big money, can easily trigger the wrong image. People hear that phrase and imagine acceleration, big winners, aggressive growth, perfect timing, a fast climb. But in reality, the psychology that gives a small account a chance to grow is almost the opposite of that fantasy. It is boring. It is repetitive. It is controlled. It is emotionally flat. It's taking the same type of setup again and again instead of forcing creativity. It's risking the same small amount instead of trying to speed up the process. It's ending the day when your limit is hit instead of hunting for redemption. It's accepting that some days will be quiet and that quiet does not mean failure. That kind of trading doesn't feel impressive in the moment. In fact, many newer traders resist it because it doesn't satisfy the emotional need that drew them into trading in the first place. It doesn't create adrenaline. It doesn't create dramatic stories. It doesn't let you feel like one great move will change your life. What it does create is consistency. And consistency is what allows compounding to exist. Not just financial compounding, but psychological compounding. Every time you respect your stop, you strengthen trust in yourself. Every time you skip a bad setup, you build restraint. Every time you end a bad day without spiraling, you build stability. Every time you size correctly, you preserve the ability to come back tomorrow clear-headed. That is how small accounts eventually become something meaningful, not through one explosive stretch, but through hundreds of ordinary decisions that protect capital and sharpen behavior. This is why mature traders often look almost detached. They're not bored because trading is easy. They're calm because they no longer need every trade to give them something emotionally. They let the edge work. They let time do the heavy lifting. They stop interfering so much. And ironically, that's when the account has the best chance to grow. There is a mindset shift that changes the entire experience of trading, especially when your account is small. You stop using trading to prove yourself, and you start using it to improve yourself. At first, that sounds like a small wording change. It isn't. If you trade to prove yourself, every session becomes a test. Every loss feels like evidence. Every win feels like temporary relief. You are constantly being judged by your own results, and that creates tension that your decision-making eventually absorbs. But if you trade to improve, each session becomes practice. Now the question is not, did I make money today? It becomes, did I follow my process today? Did I take the right setups? Did I manage risk correctly? Did I stay the same size I planned? Did I remain honest when my emotions changed? That framework is much more stable because it puts progress under your control. You cannot control whether the next trade wins. You can control whether it was your trade. You cannot control the market's timing. You can control your patience. You cannot control random short-term outcomes. You can control the quality of your repetition. This is the mindset that turns trading into a craft, and once you treat it as a craft, small account frustration starts to lose some of its power. Because the account is no longer your scoreboard alone. It becomes your training environment. Each trade is a rep. Each session reveals weaknesses. Each review shows where your process breaks under pressure. Each rule you keep becomes part of your identity. That's where confidence should come from, by the way. Not from winning streaks, not from a green day, not from one great trade. Real confidence comes from knowing that even when you feel pressure, you can still trust your behavior. That kind of confidence scales, because when the account eventually gets bigger, the habits are already in place. And if the habits are not in place, a bigger account usually just creates bigger mistakes. If you got value from this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Chasing Candles breaks down the real battle in trading, the one happening inside your own mind. Subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you in the next one.